Hi, my name is Brittany Alana. You can follow me on Facebook. I have a page called Intuitive Maternal Circle. I'm a mother of four, three of which are intact boys. I have studied genetics, reproduction, and child development for a little over a decade now, starting with high school and then, of course, beyond high school. I have also been part of the intactivist community for close to 8 years now, which included doing a lot of research from various different sources. And today I want to discuss both circumcision and the deaths related to circumcision. So I've known for a while, because of my research and intactivism over the years, that many of the circumcision-related deaths go unanswered for. Publicly, an intactivist can tell you over 100 newborn boys die each year in our country alone. Or they can say an average of 117 to 120 infant boys die each year due to circumcision complications. And that's because those are the admitted numbers that are given to the public. The reality, however, is that the number of deaths are way higher than that. You'll also hear pro-cutters say, well, if it's really so dangerous, then why is it still legal for parents to choose? How could doctors be able to get away with something like that? And those are actually really great questions, and with this, I'm going to answer both of those questions. Alright, so when you look up infant mortality rates, or you look up the most common causes of infant death post-birth, you'll notice that many of the causes listed are risks that are related to circumcision. For example, neonatal hemorrhage is said to cause over 600 infant deaths per year. It's listed as one of the most common causes of newborn death. Meanwhile, a common procedure that's practiced in our country, America, is circumcision, and it lists hemorrhage as a risk and common complication. Now, of course, other things can cause a baby to hemorrhage. I'm not saying that all neonatal hemorrhage deaths are directly tied to circumcision. However, the majority of the cases are definitely connected. This one example alone shoots circumcision deaths way above a few hundred, at least, possibly more, per year. That is only one example that raises the death toll above the admitted numbers. Then you have deaths that are related to infections. Infection is a common risk of circumcision. The mortality rate of infants, once a substantial amount of tissue becomes infected, is more than 70%. Other deadly risks of circumcision include, but they're not limited to, lung rupture and or gastric rupture from screaming so hard during the procedure, going into a state of shock during the procedure due to intense amount of pain. You'll also notice that nurses or doctors will tell you, oh, he was a champ, he slept right through it. Or you'll hear parents say, well, my son didn't scream or cry during his procedure. That's because he went into a state of shock. Shock can happen almost instantly because the pain that is triggered is so intense. And I want you to look up what going into shock does to both blood pressure and heart rate. And then in very rare cases, choking on vomit. Yes, I'm not joking, and it's rare, but it happens. A lot of babies are not allowed to feed right before the procedure because vomiting from the amount of pain and distress they're in is a common reaction to the procedure. And because they're strapped down on their backs, a nurse has to be ready to suction the vomit out. In rare cases, I want to emphasize on that word, rare, okay? This isn't common. It happens, but it's rare. They do not do so quickly enough, and that causes the baby to choke and drown on their own vomit. Again, there are other complications that can be listed as deadly, but these are just a few. In other words, the death due to circumcision complications is a lot higher than the admitted numbers. I would like to say that it's probably closer to around 700 deaths per year, likely more than that. And we're talking each and every single year. I want you to add that up. All right, let's go ahead and use 700. Let's pretend that 700 is the accurate number. I want you to add that. 700 plus 700 plus 700 plus 700, because this is the amount who would die every single year. Even if we go back to the admitted numbers, which would be about an average of 120, I want you to add that up. 120 plus 120 plus 120, because it's every single year in our country alone. However, I'm unable to specify and verify that 700, possibly more, is the actual number, because doctors have a trick. Sorry, that's my son in the background. This is how they get away with it. All right, this is the trick that doctors have. Rather than listing circumcision as the cause of death on the death certificate, they will instead list the complication that led to it. So you will see things like neonatal hemorrhage, a specific type of infection, asphyxiation, basically suffocation. I can't ever pronounce that word right. It's a tongue twister for me. Basically where they could no longer breathe due to lung rupture, or internal bleeding because of gastric rupture. Gastric rupture is the stomach rupturing. You'll see these as the cause of death on the death certificate. You do not see circumcision as the cause, even though the complication that caused the death was directly due to being circumcised. If you take the time to join intactivist groups, you will also encounter a ton, I mean an incredibly ridiculous amount of regret parents. Parents who either lost their son or they came extremely close to it. And the risk that I've given just in this alone are normally the complications that their child suffered. All right, and it really opens your eyes when you see just how common these complications are from the amount of regret parents sharing their stories. Now, why would doctors do this? That's really not a complicated answer. It sadly boils down to a couple basic reasons. Reason number one, money. A doctor who routinely performs circumcision can literally support their lifestyle off of this procedure alone. I'm talking new cars, fancy houses, regular vacations. This procedure makes them so much money that they can afford to buy and do those sorts of things. And this isn't even counting the rest of the money they make in their profession, just the money they make from circumcision. It's not about what's best for your child. Circumcision is a business, and business is about profit. I want you to remember that. Circumcision is not what's best for your child, it's about business, and business equals profit. Altogether, the medical industry in our country makes around $4 billion each year in circumcision profits. The individual doctors who perform them can make an average of $80,000 per year, sometimes more than that, depending on how many procedures they perform each week. The second reason would be reliability. Almost all doctors are clueless about proper intact care. They normally give parents the wrong intact care information. They'll tell you to retract and clean underneath it, but that's completely wrong. I want you to go look up proper intact care. You do not forcibly retract the foreskin. And then they cannot tell you the functions of foreskin. So if almost all doctors are clueless about proper intact care and the functions of foreskin, this is obviously information that they cannot give to the parents if the parents were to ask them. All right? And they seldom give the mom or dad any information that regards the risk of the procedure. They don't tell you what all could go wrong or that he could possibly die from this procedure. And many times, if they do give you any information, it's false medical benefits or sexual benefits that aren't even relevant to a baby, because he's obviously not going to be sexually active for several more years. And they do this to persuade the parent into saying yes. However, 9 times out of 10, they usually just ask you straight up, do you want him circumcised? That's it. They don't give you any information. They just straight up ask you, do you want him circumcised? If the mom says yes, she then has to sign consent papers to protect the doctor's ass. And if she says no, then she's asked countless times by various people, different staff members, if she wants him cut during her hospital stay. And I can vouch for this because I've got 3 intact boys, and every time I left one of my sons intact, I was asked countless times by people during my hospital stay like they didn't understand the word no. It's almost like you're being harassed and pressured into it. Now, can you imagine the outrage there would be if doctors were held accountable for the truth? How mad people would be if they learned that this procedure could be damaging and even deadly to a newborn child. All right? If the public was given the real numbers of children who die from this procedure every year, and they were given all the risk of the procedure, if they should say yes, and then they were given the benefits to keeping him intact and how to properly take care of him if he's left intact, a lot of people would rise up and start questioning this. They would no longer want to support this procedure anymore. They'd probably want it outlawed. Many people would probably file lawsuits if they have already had their boys circumcised. Many would no longer agree to having their children cut anymore. And this would lead to a huge decline in profit. So rather than taking responsibility and being honest for what they're doing, they hide the information. They just ask you, do you want them circumcised? No information. They lie on death certificates, and then they continue to profit because it's easier to keep the public blind while they're racking in the money. That's what the reasons boil down to. That's why doctors would continue doing this, despite the amount of children who die, infants who die. I think the real question should be this, and I really want this one to sink in. If car seats, cribs, or children's toys can be recalled and banned for causing less than 100 deaths, then why aren't the admitted numbers of circumcision deaths not publicly considered unacceptable too? The admitted numbers are over 100. So if something can be recalled and banned for less than 100 deaths, why is circumcision not being held as unacceptable too? Then you take into account that the admitted numbers are considerably low compared to the real amount of baby boys who are dying from this procedure every year. Again, we're talking several hundred, closer to 1,000 every year. Circumcision should not be labeled as a parental choice when it's actually a foolish gamble with your son's life. The facts are out there. You can follow the trail. That's what I've tried to do with this, is try to lay out a trail for you. And if you're willing to go and do your own research, there's more about this. You can go further in depth with this. You just have to be willing to research with an unbiased, open mind. You should also ask yourself, is my job as a parent to put him in extreme pain? Remember, the risks that I listed were usually a result of the amount of pain that child was in. So ask yourself, is my job as a parent to put him in extreme pain, alter his body before he can consent, and likely risk his life on top of it? Or is my job as a parent to love him and protect him just the way he was born and meant to be? That shouldn't be difficult to answer. And the reason for me coming out about this is not only because I want the public to be aware that this is a dangerous procedure. It can be damaging, it can be dangerous, it can cost him his life, not even days after birth. But I also want to make this because I feel that the medical industry, the AAP, the doctors who are performing this, they need to be held accountable. The truth needs to be put out there. All right, the real numbers need to be given to the public. I couldn't even give you a verified specific number because the specific numbers are not put out there for the public to know. They're being hidden. You have to go and hunt down a trail like I did just to try and get an idea. And it's not because I'm uneducated or because I don't know what I'm talking about. It's because the truth is being hidden and you're having to hunt for the truth. So I shouldn't have to do that, and nor should other people have to do that. Other parents should be able to look this up and see right there in front of their face what the actual numbers are. And it's not just the number of deaths per year that should be put out there and honest about. But they need to also be teaching people that foreskin is not inherently this diseased, useless, dangerous skin to keep. Both females and males have foreskin. But for men, the male foreskin has over 16 functions, which are protective, sexual, and immunological. As well as several thousand specialized fine touch nerves. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to keeping him intact, and a lot of parents don't know this. They think that they need to cut it off or else he's going to get sick and have all these infections, and that's not true. If you go outside of America, the majority of the world do not cut their infant boys. The majority of the world are actually intact males, and all you have to do is shower like a regular person is supposed to. All people, male and female, cut or intact, have to take a shower and wash their genitals. Circumcision is not a substitute for a penis bath. If he's going to have to wash his junk anyway, then why not just leave him intact? All he has to do is just wash like a normal regular person and he'll be fine. He'll be clean. And then of course, practicing safe sex. This is something that needs to be taught early on in life. Parents and schools should be teaching their teenagers how to practice safe sex, why practicing safe sex is important, and everybody, girl or boy, should be practicing safe sex. If you're practicing safe sex methods in combination with proper hygiene, there is nothing wrong with the foreskin. It's actually beneficial. People need to know this. It's not out there. It is out there, but a lot of the times we're relying on intactivist type websites that the majority of people in America do not see as reliable, and we need to be using medical websites, educational websites that are directly from medical organizations and institutes, doctors, AAP. These people need to be coming out and saying the same stuff. They need to come out and tell these people the truth. Alright? So that's why I'm making this video. I feel that they need to be held accountable and that everyone deserves the truth. When you have so many infant boys dying from a procedure that they don't even need, it's not even necessary, we have a big problem. And that problem needs to be addressed.